My son-in-law told me I was useless while standing in the kitchen I paid for in the house I bought, and the only reason I didn't answer him on the spot was because I suddenly remembered exactly where I'd left the deed with my name on it. He jabbed a finger toward the sink full of dishes like he was directing a new intern. Just leave it, Robert. You'll only make a mess. Go sit down. We've got this. You're just in the way. The we meant him and my daughter. The in the way meant me. He didn't even look at me when he said it, just brushed past to kiss Emily on the cheek, his hand casually resting on her waist like he owned everything in the room, her, the kitchen, the future. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Robert Hayes was 69 years old, retired high school history teacher, widower, grandfather, and though nobody in that kitchen remembered it in that moment, the legal owner of the two-story suburban house on Maple Ridge Lane. He stood there with a dish towel in his hand, water running over a plate, the sound of laughter from the living room where his grandkids were watching a movie. He'd driven 40 minutes in Saturday traffic to spend the afternoon with them, ended up in front of a sink, and somehow that had turned into a referendum on his existence. Brad didn't even sound angry. That was the worst part. He sounded irritated, like Robert was a glitch in his carefully curated life. Brad was 38, all sharp jawline and tailored shirts, self-made entrepreneur with a marketing agency that lived mostly on Instagram and buzzwords. He'd grown up middle class in Ohio and talked like he'd clawed his way out of a coal mine. Robert had liked him once, or wanted to, for Emily's sake. Dad, Emily said softly now as if to smooth the jagged edge of Brad's words. Why don't you take your coffee and sit with the kids? We're almost done here. Robert dried his hands on the towel, turned off the tap. He looked at his daughter, at the way she watched Brad's face before she said anything, like she was constantly checking the weather. His lip twitched, but he kept his voice even. Sure, he said. You two seem to have everything under control. Brad didn't even notice the irony. He was back to talking about some campaign he was running, gesturing with a wooden spoon as if the kitchen were a boardroom. Emily laughed at something he said. Robert walked out quietly, coffee in hand, his heart beating a bit too fast. In the living room, 7-year-old Lily sat curled under a blanket, eyes glued to the animated movie. 4-year-old Max was sprawled on the rug, building something with plastic bricks. Grandpa, look, Max said without looking up. I made a spaceship. Robert sat down in the armchair by the window, the one he'd helped pick out when they moved in. That's a very serious spaceship, he said, forcing cheer into his voice. Looks like it could go all the way to Jupiter, Max gasped. Can we go to Jupiter in your imagination? Robert replied. Best tickets in town. Lily glanced over. Grandpa, why did Mom tell you to sit down like that? Did you do something wrong? Children notice more than adults like to admit. Your mom's just tired from cooking, Robert said. I've already had my turn at the dishes, thousands of them over many years. I'm retired now, remember. Lily seemed satisfied, turned back to the movie. Robert watched his grandchildren's faces in the flickering light of the screen, feeling the familiar mix of love and regret tug at his chest. He'd done his best with Emily, he really had, but Margaret's death had left a crater in both their lives. Some days he wondered if he'd ever filled even a corner of it. After dinner, after dessert, after the kids had begged for just one more story, Robert finally grabbed his jacket from the coat rack. Emily walked him to the door. Thanks for coming, Dad, she said, hugging him. Her hug was quick now, always a bit rushed, like she had somewhere else to be even when she didn't. Kids love seeing you. I love seeing them, Robert replied. He hesitated. Did I do something to annoy Brad, or is he always like this now? Her smile faltered for a second. He's just stressed, she said quickly. The business is a lot right now. Clients, employees, the mortgage, the kids, you know how it is. He didn't mean anything, Robert said, which was not agreement but not disagreement either. Well, tell him thanks for dinner, she nodded, but didn't call Brad to the hallway. That told him enough. The street outside was damp from a light drizzle, pavement shining beneath the streetlights. Robert walked down the front path, the path he'd watched being poured by contractors 5 years earlier when this house was just a skeleton of framing and hope. He glanced back once at the warm glow in the windows, at the silhouettes moving inside. You're useless. The words settled somewhere under his ribs and refused to budge. Robert's own apartment was a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a quiet complex 20 minutes away, older building, no elevator, but it was clean and the rent was manageable. He'd moved there after Margaret died and after he'd done the thing he thought would cement his place in Emily's life forever. He let himself in, turned on the lamp by the couch, and for a moment just stood there. His place was neat. Bookshelves full of history texts and novels, framed photos of Emily as a child, of Margaret backstage in a faded theater shot. A small kitchen, a small table, one worn but comfortable couch. It had been enough. He went straight to the hall closet. On the top shelf, behind a box of Christmas decorations, was a battered accordion file folder, tan, edges softened by time. He pulled it down carefully and carried it to the kitchen table. His hands knew exactly where to open it. 5 years ago, he'd stood in a bank office with a pen that shook slightly in his fingers as he signed the papers that would drain most of his savings. There it was, the deed, Maple Ridge Lane, Lot 14, owner of record, Robert Allen Hays. He ran his finger along the printed lines. He told himself back then it was just temporary. We'll refinance in a year or two, Brad had said, flashing that brilliant smile that had charmed Emily and half their wedding guests. Put it in my name and Emily's, once my income stabilizes. This just gets us in the door. You're the hero, Rob. Robert had liked the sound of that, hero. After Margaret's death, he'd felt like anything but. He wanted to do one big, undeniable good thing for his daughter, something that said, I'm still your father, I still matter. So he'd bought the house, cash, years of savings, Margaret's life insurance, the inheritance from his own parents. All of it poured into walls and roof and granite countertops, into a backyard with a swing set and a tree just right for climbing. The refinancing had never happened, there had always been a reason. Rates aren't great right now, Rob. My accountant says we should wait. I need to show 2 more quarters of income, then it'll be easier. Market's weird at the moment. It'd be dumb to rock the boat. And Robert, who had never been particularly savvy about finances, who'd spent most of his life grading essays and trying to make teenagers care about reconstruction, had believed him. Or pretended to. Now he stared at the deed until his eyes blurred. Then he reached for his phone. The call to the county recorder's office on Monday was routine from their side. From his, it felt like stepping into a new play without a script. I just wanted to confirm the ownership record for a property, he said, reading off the address. Yes, I can pull that up, the woman on the other end replied. He heard keys clicking. Okay, here we go. 312 Maple Ridge Lane. Owner, Robert Allen Hayes. That's you. That's me, he said, his mouth dry. No liens, no second mortgages. No, sir, nothing recorded. Property taxes current, all in your name. He thanked her and hung up slowly. So it wasn't just a sentimental assumption, it was legal fact. Brad might be paying the utilities, the internet, the new stainless steel fridge, but the land under his feet belonged to the man he called useless. Robert sat at his small kitchen table, deed in front of him, hands folded. A part of him wanted to march back to Maple Ridge Lane right then, slam the deed on the kitchen counter and watch Brad's face fall apart, but another part, older, wiser, knew that anger made people sloppy. He'd taught enough teenagers to know that the first outburst rarely fixed anything. It just started round two, so instead he picked up the folder, slid it back together, put it away. Then he called someone he hadn't spoken to in months. Claire, it's Robert Hayes. There was a pause, then a warm chuckle. Robert, I haven't heard your voice since retirement. What trouble are you in? Claire was not a lawyer now, but she had been once before she switched careers and became the school counselor at Lincoln High. For 2 decades she had shared a staff room, a parking lot, and more than a few difficult parent meetings with Robert. If anyone could give him a reality check, it was her. Family trouble, he said, and possibly property trouble. He told her everything, the slap of words in the kitchen, the in the way, the deed, the years of unfulfilled refinancing promises. Claire listened without interrupting, the way she always had, humming occasionally to show she was following. Well, she said finally, the good news is you're not crazy, the house is yours. If it's in your name, it's in your name, full stop, no matter what stories your son-in-law has built around that. And the bad news, Robert asked. The bad news is now you have to decide what kind of man you want to be with that information. I thought you might say something annoyingly wise, he muttered. She laughed. Are you calling because you want to kick them out or because you want to remind them? I don't know, he admitted. All I know is he looked me in the eye in that kitchen and made me feel like I was a burden. In the house I bought, I didn't expect to care so much, but I do, and I'm tired, Claire, tired of being treated like an afterthought. You're not an afterthought, she said gently. You're a boundary that's never been enforced. There's a difference. He thought about that long after they hung up. Following week, Emily called. Dad, can we talk? She asked. Her voice sounded strained. Of course, Robert said, though his stomach lurched a little. They met at a cafe halfway between his apartment and her house. He arrived early, ordered a coffee, sat by the window. He watched people coming and going, couples with strollers, college students with laptops, a group of retirees having what looked like a regular Tuesday morning gossip session. He'd always thought retirement would look like that, cozy, predictable. Then life had given him a very different stage. Emily arrived 5 minutes late, eyes tired, hair in a messy bun. She looked older than her 35 years. Hey, Dad, she said, hugging him. Her hug still smelled faintly, impossibly like the baby shampoo they'd used when she was a toddler, or maybe that was his memory overlaying reality. They sat. She wrapped her hands around a mug of tea like it was a lifeline but didn't drink. Brad told me he was short with you, she began carefully. He feels bad, does he? Robert asked. He kept his tone neutral. He's under a lot of pressure, she continued. The agency lost a big client, the mortgage is high, the kids are a lot sometimes, and he feels like you don't understand what it's like for us. Robert's eyebrows rose. I don't understand what it's like to juggle bills and responsibilities. You know what I mean, she said quickly. Your pension comes in every month, your life is simpler now. He let that sink in. His simpler life had meant teaching night classes in his 50s to make sure Emily could go to college without crushing debt. It had meant repairing broken pipes himself instead of calling a plumber. It had meant eating canned soup the month after Margaret's cancer diagnosis because the treatments cost more than they'd expected. But yes, his life was simple now because he'd spent decades making it that way. Do you think I'm useless? He asked quietly, her eyes snapped up. What? No, of course not. But you didn't correct him, he said. When he said I'd just make a mess, that I was in the way, you asked me to sit down instead. Her cheeks flushed. I didn't want to escalate it in front of the kids. I understand that, Robert said, but I need you to understand something too, Emily. That house you're so worried about paying for, do you remember how you got it? She froze, her fingers tightened around the mug. Dad, she began, warning in her voice. No, listen, he said gently. I'm not bringing this up to brag, I'm bringing it up because reality seems to have shifted in your house. When you and Brad wanted to buy in Maple Ridge, you had, what, 10,000 in savings, 22, she muttered. And the house cost 400,000, he said. You couldn't get approved on your income at the time. Brad's business was still new, so we came up with an arrangement. I would buy the house, in my name, so you wouldn't lose it, so the kids would have a backyard. So your commute would be easier, so you could sleep at night. Emily stared at the table. We always planned to refinance, she said weakly. And I always planned to be 6 feet tall, Robert replied. But here we are, she winced, then sighed. We tried, the timing was bad, the rates were bad, the accountant said we should wait, he nodded slowly. Maybe, but the end result is the same. For 5 years, you have lived in a house that belongs to me, not in the sentimental sense, in the legal sense. That house, my grandson's father told me I was useless. Emily, do you have any idea how that feels? Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know he said that exact word, she whispered. He told me he just snapped a little. Robert blinked. So he didn't tell you? No, she said, shaking her head. He said he told you not to worry about the dishes, that you took it personally. Robert sat back. The lie settled over him like ash. Have you ever heard him talk about me when I'm not there? He asked. She hesitated. That was answer enough. Sometimes he gets frustrated, she admitted. He thinks you could help more financially, Robert said. She said nothing. I helped as much as I could, Robert continued quietly. I helped you buy the house, I helped with your student loans, I helped when Max was born and Brad took that unpaid growth period in his business. I don't keep score, Emily, but apparently your husband does, and in his ledger I seem to have come up short. She wiped her eyes. He's not a monster, Dad. He's just scared. Everything is on his shoulders. Not everything, Robert said. Not the deed, that's on mine. She finally looked up. What does that mean? It means, Robert said slowly, that I've spent 5 years pretending I was just a guest in your home, that I had no say, no rights. But that's not true. I do have rights. And if my presence there upsets Brad so much, perhaps it's time to make the nature of our arrangement clear. Fear flashed across her face. Are you going to evict us? She whispered. Robert's chest ached. She was still his little girl underneath the messy bun and stress lines. He remembered her as a 7-year-old who'd cried when he'd thrown away a broken toy because it belonged to our home. How did you tell that child, now grown, that her home had become leverage? I don't want to make you homeless, he said. I'd never do that, but I also won't let your husband keep rewriting history. So here's what I'm going to do, Emily. I'm going to give him a choice. What kind of choice? She asked. A very simple one, Robert replied. Respect your father or pay your landlord. He left the cafe before she could respond, not because he wanted to be dramatic, but because if he stayed one more second, he might back down. And backing down was how they'd gotten here in the first place. The envelope came a week later. Robert had spent those days at his kitchen table, drafting and redrafting the letter until it said exactly what he meant, no more, no less. He'd gone back to Claire with it, asked her to read it like a jury would. It's firm, she said approvingly. Not vindictive, you're stating facts, you're offering options, you're not threatening, you're simply reminding him who actually owns the stage he's been stomping around on. The document inside the envelope contained three things: a copy of the deed, a formal rental agreement with a fair market rent listed, and a letter. The letter was only one page. Robert had learned over years of writing lesson plans that people stopped paying attention after the first page. Brad received it on a Thursday afternoon. He was in his home office, ring light off for once, emails open. The business wasn't doing as well as his Instagram said it was. Late invoices, a client threatening to walk. A staff designer quitting unexpectedly. He was tired, wired on too much coffee, and quietly panicking about the next quarter. Emily came into the room, a manila envelope in her hand. This came for you, she said, voice tight. From Dad, Brad smirked, masking his unease. Let me guess, another article he clipped from the paper about pensions. Just open it, she said. She didn't sit down. He slit the envelope with a paper knife, pulled out the papers. The first thing he saw was the letter. Brad, have spent 5 years being a silent partner in your living arrangement. It's time that changed. Enclosed is a copy of the deed to this house. As you can see, I am the sole legal owner. When I bought it, the understanding was that you and Emily would refinance into your own names when you were able. It's been 5 years. In that time, you have repeatedly spoken about me as if I were a burden. You have dismissed my presence in this house in front of my grandchildren. You have referred to me as useless in a kitchen I paid for. You have presented yourself as the provider for this household while ignoring the fact that you live in a house purchased with my life savings. I am not writing this to shame you. I am writing it to offer you a clear choice. Option 1, you and Emily sign the enclosed rental agreement. You become my tenants at a fair market rate with all the rights and responsibilities that come with that. You agree that I am your landlord and treat me with the basic respect such a relationship requires. I in turn will continue to allow you to live in this house, and I will not pursue refinancing or sale for at least 3 years, provided rent is paid on time and our relationship remains civil. Option 2, you decline to sign the agreement. In that case, I will list the property for sale within 60 days. You will have the option to purchase it at 10% below market value if you qualify for financing. If you do not, the house will be sold to someone else and you will need to find alternative housing. This is not a threat. It is a boundary. I am your father-in-law, not your bank, not your punching bag, and certainly not useless. I will no longer participate in the fiction that this house appeared from nowhere. You have 7 days to consider. After that, I will assume you have chosen option 2. Sincerely, Robert Hayes. Brad read it once, frowning, then again slower. His heartbeat hammered in his ears. Is this some kind of joke? He snapped, flipping to the deed. His eyes scanned the words. Owner of record, Robert Allen Hays. Had seen the deed before years ago, back when he needed Robert's help to get the house. Back when he'd told himself it was temporary. Somewhere along the way, as business deals and Instagram posts piled up, he'd quietly rewritten the story in his own mind. He was the provider, this was his house, his achievement. It was jarring to see that belief dismantled by a line of ink on paper. It's not a joke, Emily said quietly. He showed me his copy last week. Why didn't you tell me? Brad demanded. I wanted to, she said, but I wanted to see what you'd say when you read it for yourself. He barked out a laugh. What I'd say, I'll tell you what I say. This is manipulative. He's trying to control us. He's threatening to make his own daughter homeless if we don't kiss his ring. He gave us options, she replied. Reasonable ones. He's your father, Emily. Brad slammed the letter on the desk. What kind of man weaponizes a house against his own family? Emily's eyes filled. The kind of man who drained his savings so he could live here, she said. The kind of man you called useless. Brad opened his mouth, then closed it. I was upset, he muttered. You lied about it, she said. You told me you just asked him not to worry about the dishes. You didn't tell me you called him useless in front of the kids. Brad looked away, his jaw worked. I didn't want to upset you. You didn't want me to see the full picture, she said. Silence fell between them, heavy as wet wool. So what, you're on his side now? Brad asked finally, bitterness creeping in. There aren't sides, Emily replied. There are facts, and the fact is we live in a house my father owns. And we have treated him like an obligation instead of a blessing, Brad scoffed, pushing away from the desk. Oh, please, he loves playing the martyr. He wants gratitude tattoos or something. Emily flinched. Do you hear yourself? She asked. This is exactly what he's talking about. Fine, Brad snapped. You know what? If he wants to play hardball, we can lawyer up too. I've put thousands into upgrades. The deck, the kitchen, the bathroom, sweat equity. Ever heard of it? Maybe a judge will find that interesting. Emily stared at him. What judge? She whispered. You want this to go to court? He shrugged, bluffing. If it has to. Emily sank into the chair opposite him, suddenly looking very small. I can't do that, she said. I won't stand in front of a courtroom and pretend my dad didn't buy this house. I was there, Brad. I saw the cashier's check. I watched him sign. You told me we'd refinance in a year. That was 5 years ago. Things changed, Brad said. Yes, she replied. They did, but not in the way you think. At night, Brad lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, the letter burning like a brand in his thoughts. He pictured their lives packed into boxes, the kids crying because they had to leave their rooms, his office reduced to a corner of a rented condo, his carefully cultivated image crumbling when people realized the proud homeowner had been living in his father-in-law's house all along. His pride screamed at him to fight, to call a lawyer, to dig up every home improvement receipt, to argue about equity and verbal agreements and my contributions. But under the pride, something else lurked, fear, because he knew deep down that whatever he'd put into this house, it hadn't been equal to what Robert had given, not in money, and certainly not in respect. 7 days passed. Robert did not call to remind them. He did not show up unannounced. He went about his quiet routines, morning walks, library visits, coffee with Claire on Wednesdays. But every night the folder sat on his kitchen table, a physical representation of the clock ticking down. On the 7th day, the doorbell rang at Robert's apartment. He opened the door to find Emily alone, hair damp from rain, envelope in hand. Can I come in? She asked. Always, he said, stepping aside. She sat at his small table, placing the envelope between them like a carefully handled artifact. We signed, she said simply. Robert exhaled slowly, tension he hadn't admitted to himself draining from his shoulders. Both of you, he asked. She swallowed. Yes, Brad wasn't happy about it. He feels humiliated, but he also doesn't want to move. He doesn't want to uproot the kids, and he knows, she added, that a bank won't approve us right now, not with his income being what it is. Robert nodded. He'd suspected as much. I told him, Emily continued, voice shaking slightly, that if he tried to fight you in court, I would testify for you, that I would tell the truth, all of it. I think that was the moment he realized he'd pushed too far. Robert reached across the table, resting his hand lightly on hers. That must have been hard to say, he said. She laughed weakly. You have no idea. I might, he replied. I once had to tell a beloved football coach that his son plagiarized an essay. This feels slightly bigger. She smiled for the first time that day, then her eyes filled. Dad, I'm so sorry, she whispered, for how we've treated you, for letting Brad talk about you like that, for not stopping it, for making you feel like you were some extra piece of furniture in our lives. Robert squeezed her hand. Thank you for saying that, he said, but Emily, this isn't just about apologies. It's about what happens next, she nodded. I know we're your tenants now, you're my family, he corrected, who also happen to be my tenants. That means I have responsibilities too. If the roof leaks, I fix it. If the furnace dies, I pay for the new one. If Frank gets tight 1 month because Max breaks his arm and there are hospital bills, you can call me and we will work something out. Her eyes widened. You'd do that, he chuckled. I didn't buy that house to squeeze you. I bought it to protect you. That hasn't changed. What has changed is that I will no longer subsidize disrespect. That's the line. She wiped her cheeks. What about Brad? She asked softly. Do you hate him? Robert leaned back, considering. Hate was a heavy word when he'd seen too many teenagers toss around casually. I don't hate him, he said slowly. I think he's arrogant, insecure, angry, and I think he's been allowed to believe that other people exist to prop up his image. That's not entirely his fault. Life has rewarded him for bluster, but he's about to learn that there are people he can't bulldoze. I happen to be one of them. Will you still come over? She whispered. See the kids, help with things, he smiled. I'll come over as long as I'm welcome, truly welcome, not tolerated, and I'll help when it's appropriate, but I will not be guilted into paying for every whim. If Brad wants a new deck, he can budget for it. If you need help with something essential, we'll talk, she nodded slowly. I can live with that. He squeezed her hand again. Good, because that's the life we're going to build from now on, clear, honest, adult. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that feels like a bridge, not a wall. Brad did not come to see Robert that day or the next. It took him 2 weeks. On a Sunday afternoon, Robert was in his apartment, halfway through a book about the fall of empires, when there was a knock at the door. Not the confident, rhythmic knock of a neighbor, the tentative, uneven one of someone who would very much like to be somewhere else. He opened the door to find Brad on the threshold, hands jammed in the pockets of a jacket that looked more expensive than Robert's car. Hey, Brad said. For once, there was no swagger in his voice. Can I come in? Robert studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. Sure. Brad walked in as if entering a foreign country. Eyes flicked over the small living room, the bookshelves, the framed photos. I've never been here, he realized aloud. No, Robert said calmly. You haven't. They sat at the table. Robert did not offer coffee. He wasn't sure how long this conversation would last. Brad cleared his throat. So the landlord wants to talk, he attempted, half joking. The landlord always wants to talk, Robert replied. So does the father-in-law. Brad flinched slightly. Emily said you'd want to discuss things, he said. Robert folded his hands. I want to make sure we understand each other, he said. The rent amount, does it seem fair? Brad shifted. It's lower than market, to be honest, he muttered. I checked, you could charge more. I could, Robert agreed. But I'm not trying to profit off you, I'm trying to formalize what was informal, to put our arrangement on the same plane as reality. Brad stared at the table. I knew you helped us, he said. I just didn't want to admit how much. Made me feel less like a man, Robert sighed. Brad, being a man isn't about pretending you did everything alone. It's about taking responsibility for what you did and didn't do. You asked for help, I gave it. That doesn't make you less. What makes you less is insulting the hand that helped you. Brad's jaw clenched. I know what I said, he murmured. Do you? Robert asked softly. Because you told Emily a different version, you minimized it. That's not just disrespectful, that's dishonest. Brad's shoulders slumped. I didn't want her to think I was that guy, he said. The one who talks down to her father. Well, Robert said dryly, you might be that guy, but you don't have to stay that guy. Brad looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means, Robert said, you have a chance here, not just with me, with yourself. You can treat this as a humiliation, a story where you're the victim of a controlling old man who pulled the rug out from under you, or you can treat it as a wake-up call. A moment when the story you told yourself about who you are collided with reality and you chose to change. Brad's throat worked. I don't know how to change, he said miserably. All my life I've been told to push, to hustle, to project confidence, to never show weakness, to always spin things. My dad used to say, never let them see you sweat. How did that work out for him? Robert asked. Brad laughed once, bitter. He's on his third marriage and still renting, he admitted. Robert nodded. Maybe it's time to try a different model. Brad was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. Emily told me, he said slowly, that when she was a kid and you couldn't afford something, you'd sit her down and show her the numbers. You'd open the bank account, the bills, the checkbook. You'd explain why you couldn't buy the fancy sneakers but could buy the ones on sale. You treated her like she could handle the truth. I did, Robert said. She could. Nobody ever did that with me, Brad admitted. Money was magic in my house. Either we had it or we didn't, and when we didn't, it was everyone else's fault. The bank, the boss, the government. My dad would yell about how he was owed things. I picked up more of that than I realized. Robert studied him, seeing not the slick entrepreneur but the boy behind him, scared, defensive, hungry. What do you want, Brad? He asked. Not the Instagram version, the real one. Brad opened his mouth. Closed it, tried again. I want, he said slowly, as if testing each word for taste, to be a good husband, a good dad, a good man. I want my kids to look at me the way Emily looked at you when she talks about you. He stopped, throat tight. But I'm not that man right now, am I? Robert shook his head once gently. Not yet, but you could be if you decide you're more interested in being real than being impressive. Brad wiped his eyes quickly with the heel of his hand, embarrassed. Why are you being kind? He asked. I've been a jerk to you. You could crush us. You could sell the house tomorrow. Because vengeance doesn't interest me, Robert said simply. Justice does, and justice isn't about making you suffer. It's about putting things in their proper order. Right now, that means acknowledging that the house you brag about is one you were given. That the man you dismissed as useless was the one who made your comfortable life possible. That your children's security is built on someone else's sacrifice. And you can say those things out loud without choking on them, then maybe we can talk about what comes next. Brad swallowed hard. I'm sorry, he said, the words awkward in his mouth. For what? Robert asked. For Brad gestured helplessly, calling you useless, for lying to Emily, for acting like I was doing you a favor by letting you see your grandkids, for thinking of you as a wallet with a person attached. Robert nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that, he said. Now I need you to show it. Brad asked. Start small, Robert said. When people ask about the house, tell the truth. When the kids ask how you got it, you tell them their grandpa helped. You invite me over because you want me there, not because you feel obligated. And when you are stressed and scared and angry about money, you do not take it out on me. You say you're scared. That's what adults do. Brad let out a shaky breath. That sounds hard. It is, Robert said. But so is pretending to be someone you're not all the time. You've been doing that for years. How's it working out for you? For the first time since he'd met the younger man, Robert saw something he hadn't seen before in Brad's eyes. Humility, fragile, unsteady, real. I'll try, Brad said quietly. Good, Robert replied. Because I'm not going anywhere, and neither is the truth. Over the next year, their lives didn't magically transform into a fairy tale. This was not that kind of story. Brad still had bad days. Days when a client backed out and he paced the kitchen muttering about idiots and missed chances. Days when he looked at the rent check and winced. Days when pride flared and he had to swallow the angry retort on his tongue. But he also started saying things like, we're lucky your dad helped us with this place, when friends complimented the house. The first time he did it at a barbecue, he glanced at Robert as if asking if he'd said it right. Robert just nodded, hiding a smile. Emily went to therapy. She unpacked years of trying to keep the peace between the two men she loved most. She learned that smoothing over someone's bad behavior wasn't kindness. It was complicity. She apologized to her father again, this time with more understanding of why it had hurt. The kids grew. Lily learned long division. Max started soccer. They knew now in clear child language that Grandpa helped Mom and Dad get this house when they couldn't afford it. Sometimes they drew pictures of their home with Grandpa standing proudly in front of it. That more than any letter or deed told Robert he'd done the right thing. 3 years later, Brad's business finally stabilized. Not at the flashy level he'd once fantasized about, but at a solid, respectable one. He had fewer clients, but better ones. He stopped taking every gig that promised fast money and started choosing ones he could deliver on honestly. One evening, he and Emily invited Robert over for dinner. The kids had made welcome landlord grandpa signs, which made Robert laugh so hard he had to sit down. After dessert, Brad cleared his throat. We have something for you, he said, sliding an envelope across the table. Robert eyed it warily. If this is tickets to a timeshare presentation, the answer is no. It's not, Brad said, managing a genuine smile. Just open it. Robert did. Inside was a letter from a bank. Approval notice, mortgage loan FOR, Bradley SIMMONS and email Y SIMMONS. He looked up, stunned. You're buying me out? He asked. Brad shook his head. We're buying you off the deed, he corrected gently. At a fair price, the appraiser came last week. We'll pay you what the house is worth now, every cent. Robert's throat tightened. You don't have to, we know, Emily said, reaching for his hand. That's why we want to. You carried this for us when we couldn't. It's our turn to carry it now, without pretending we did it all ourselves. Brad exhaled slowly, looking Robert in the eye. You gave us a home, he said. Now we want to give you something too. Security, the kind you deserve in retirement. No more worrying about our furnace when yours is making noises. Let us do this. For a long moment, Robert couldn't speak. All he could think of was Margaret, of the conversations they'd had in hospital rooms about Emily's future. He wished she could see this. The messy, imperfect, beautiful way their family had clawed its way back to something honest. Finally, he nodded, blinking back tears. All right, he managed. Let's do it properly this time. The closing happened in a quiet office with a notary and too many pens. Robert signed his name one last time on the Maple Ridge deed, then watched as Brad and Emily signed theirs beneath it. When it was done, Brad turned to him. You know, he said, half smiling, technically this proves you were never useless. Robert chuckled. I never was, he said, but I'm glad you finally believe it. They walked out of the office together into the afternoon light, the three of them side by side. The house on Maple Ridge Lane belonged to Brad and Emily now fully. The burden of it, the pride in it, the responsibility for it, all theirs. Robert drove back to his apartment with a check in his pocket and something lighter in his chest. He thought of all the things the money could do: travel, better healthcare, maybe that writing course he'd always wanted to take. But what mattered most wasn't what he gained. It was what he refused to lose, his self-respect. My son-in-law said I was useless. He didn't know I owned the house he lived in. Now he did know, so did Emily, so would their children one day. Not as a weapon, but as a story about how pride almost cost them everything and how truth, spoken firmly and calmly, pulled them back from the edge. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.